This is 12 years old.
Same as Zombie Takeout. What's up? Welcome to episode 264 of Zombie
Takeout.
The B-Movie Cult Movie Podcast. I'm Uncle John.
And I'm Scotto.
And you had a bit of an announcement before we got into this show.
Yeah. This very sad news. A buddy of mine, Toby, from the old neighborhood. I don't think I would have lasted radio or have been as good an improviser had I not hung out with this guy. The world lost him, and been missing him, and I want to dedicate this episode to him.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
All right, so on to our usual, starting with some listener submitted, which is a new thing for us. It's been a while.
Who are these listeners?
We've got something from Bruce Stardy and something from Danny Meeks, both on the announcements for the change in plans this week, one on Facebook, one on Google+. On Facebook, Bruce said, "While I'm sad you won't be doing Frankenhooker because, well, Frankenhooker, Collision Course does feature a great song in the bowling alley, the outfield's beat music. It's hard to hear, but it is there, and it's a pretty catchy tune. If he hadn't pointed this out, I don't think I would have even noticed a song in that scene."
I still missed it. It was probably the only good song in this whole shitty soundtrack, too.
I was specifically listening for it, and I had listened to, Bruce posted a video for it. I listened to that, and I was paying special attention.
Yeah, there's a lot of 80s pop bands that get shit, but the outfield were definitely some of the good guys, you know? Yeah. And it's a shame they weren't bigger.
Mm-hmm. And everything else in this movie was generic 80s movie pop.
Oh my god. I was kind of wondering, is there a single 80s soundtrack that just gets shared among all the 80s movies?
Well, you know how they have those generic sound effects discs?
Yes.
And, talk bed discs that you buy the rights for, and, about 20 different radio stations use them. GarageBand has that now. They have royalty-free, music samples that a lot of podcasts use.
I'm sure there are a lot of people very thankful that we have not gotten a hold of any of that stuff.
You're all very lucky that I'm a musician. Otherwise, we probably would have
ran it into the ground.
Yeah. But it's something like that. It's probably like this generic music that they, producers all buy the rights for. Also, Danny Meeks on Google Plus, in reference to the same announcement, said both good choices.
They are solid B movies.
Mm-hmm.
This one,
good choices in terms of the quality of our episodes, perhaps. I wouldn't say good choices in terms of movies. Incidentally, I talked to Jen on Monday. We watched Sharknado 2 together. She hadn't seen it yet.
Oh, wow.
And I'd mentioned that we were pushing back Frankenhooker to do Collision Course. The backstory on this is it's been on the list for like 3 or 4 years. I never thought we'd find it. I was just kind of looking through the movies on HBO Now and happened to see it, and my jaw hit the ground, and I had to tell Scott immediately and said, we're pushing Frankenhooker back.
This probably was on HBO Go or whatever for as long as HBO Go has existed because it's an HBO movie.
Oh, okay. It may have been there the whole time, and I just never noticed it.
Like, it wasn't just a direct-to-cable. I think they did it for theatrical release when they first did it.
Theatrical release, but it was pushed back to straight-to-video. Yeah, anyway, Jen was kind of bummed that we were pushing back Frankenhooker because she loves Frankenhooker. She's the one who reminded me of it. So we will be.
I wasn't aware there were this many people that were Frankenhooker fans.
So we'll be doing it right after the Godzilla-G, which we're starting the year with. So
you're gonna have to wait a while for Frankenhooker. Sorry, guys.
Probably early February.
Yeah.
All right, so on to this week's movie, which, as I said, is from, well, either 1989 or 1992, depending on how you look at it.
I've actually heard 1986 on some place.
It's 89 or 92. It was filmed in 89, shelved until 92. And it is Collision Course. Of course, that brings us to the impromptu plot summary, sponsored by Ernie Hudson's late 80s representation, who would like you all to know that they are very, very sorry for their client's involvement in this film.
And also brought to you by the 1980s. Just how much blow did it take to get to this point?
It's like, how many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop? The world may never know.
And by the way, Ernie Hudson, criminally underused in this.
Criminally cast in this movie. The man is a great actor, and this is after Ghostbusters. He could have done way better.
He had like 2 scenes in it. Well, like I said, the rumor is that there was somebody on IMDb that claims this was actually filmed in '86.
Okay, I was seeing 89, but...
I was too, but it would explain a bit more,
yeah,
I think.
True.
But anyway, the impromptu plot summary. See Beverly Hills Cop, only it's a Japanese police officer coming to Detroit, which is where Axel Foley was from, if you think about it. But so yes, there's this Japanese guy who has a prototype and was going to sell it, who stole a prototype from this Japanese auto company because they're just so much better than we are at making cars. And he was going to sell it to some slimy American car maker that was mob related, but he winds up getting killed accidentally. And that draws Tokyo to send a police officer of their own over, only he doesn't acknowledge, he doesn't announce his presence as a cop to anybody, any local authorities. He's just kind of operating under the radar. When he runs into Mr. Cool Ranch Doritos himself, Jay Leno.
Because the Japanese are known for doing things, off the book, their own way.
Right.
Being such rebels.
So, right, there's another person that died in that scene at the beginning was Leno's former partner. I can't remember Leno's character's name because it doesn't even matter because he is just Jay Leno with a gun.
I can't remember either character's name. Well, his was Tony Costas. I can't remember, and I don't know that I could have pronounced Marita's name Marita's character's name because I never saw it written. I would have just had to hear it in his accent.
But so he's he's a detective, but he's not on homicide, but he instead takes this case because, they got one of his own, and see him trying to act all, vengeance and everything, just hilarious. But anyway, so of course, they wind up running into each other. They get each other in a bunch of trouble. They chase each other several times, and before they finally decide, we're going to work together and be buddies and cops. We're buddy cops.
Yeah, we could have just as easily called this movie Grab Ass the Movie for that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there was one scene where he sat on his lap, for fuck's sake. But anyway, so they fight each henchman individually. One of them finally gets killed. Then they get the other one. The henchman, yeah. And actually, before they get to the final fight scene, they realize they have way too much movie to go because it's only like less than an hour into it.
Yeah.
So they go to this public gathering. They create this whole scene, get themselves thrown off the case again.
The opening of a free clinic, to be specific.
Yes, they get Leno suspended. They get Marita thrown in jail. And of course, they wind up getting out of it and pursuing the case anyway. And hilarity goes flying through the windshield, shall we say.
It does end with a great special effect that is very Troma. Earned it a half a brain for me.
It was a serious what the fuck moment.
Now, this is a rare case where the movie has no plot summary on Wikipedia. Now, we've done a number of movies that just don't have Wikipedia pages because they're too obscure. And I think there maybe have been one or two that have had Wikipedia pages but no summary, but that is incredibly rare. particularly for a movie that had some money behind it initially.
This had a cast, if you think about it.
Mm.
I mean,
Marita was still pretty big in the late 80s.
of
And this
course,
was just before Leno got the Tonight Show.
Leno at this point was, I mean, whether it's 86 or 89, Leno was still like guest hosting the Tonight Show and a
Yeah.
comedian, a pretty big comedian at the time. But you have like the Paul Provenza looking guy
Mm.
who was the main heavy here.
Oh, Chris Sarandon.
Right, Chris Sarandon, who had just done Princess Bride.
Okay.
Randall Tex Cobb, who of
Mhm.
course I don't know how many films he's appeared
Well,
as a
he's
heavy
done
in.
a lot, but he was never really that well known. He's one of those, if you watch a lot of movies, you pick him out, and I bet 50% of people actually can name him.
Well, he's a heavy.
That's kind of what he does.
Played the same role.
Yeah,
In fact,
sex and
this
heck.
one actually let him act probably the most I've ever seen him in any
Probably,
other
yeah.
film. I mean, it's before Raising Arizona, of course, which was who was his, hang him up after that because there's no need to have a movie after that.
On to the beginning, because I had to, I won't say I had to, but I was very tempted to tap out during the opening credits.
Really?
Because of the bloody music.
But there was one thing that clued me in to the comedy gold we were about to experience.
Okay.
One thing that answers the question of who takes a turn of a script like this and says, yeah, I'm going to put like $13 million down and make a movie out of this. And that one thing is De Laurentiis.
Ah, okay. Now this makes a lot more sense.
As soon as I saw that in the opening, I was like, holy shit. The same guys that brought us Dune brought us Leno and Pat Morita.
And lots of cheesy, sword and sorcery movies in the 80s.
Yes.
Now, there was one thing that happened in the beginning of the film. There's this drag racing scene. Of course, the cop has the drag race, the guys in the Trans Am.
Yeah.
And they get pulled over. Well, Leno decides to take the hit because he's a cop. So he pulls over, he tells the other guys to go. And he gets out of his car before the cops get out of their car.
Yeah.
Now, maybe things were different in the late 80s, but today you'd at least have a gun pulled on you, if not be flat out shot.
Well, come on. He's white.
Well, yeah, you'd still get a gun drawn if you were white. And then he proceeds to hit on the female cop.
Yeah. Well, that was after he showed that he was a cop.
That's true. And this is something that he does throughout the movie, and it fails more spectacularly every time he does it, to the point where the last time he tries it, he just gets flat out ignored. I did enjoy that.
You just have to wonder about this script, though, from the beginning. This, had the component of being as decent as any other movie put out in that time period. I mean, the director, went on to do Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
But
I just think it works with that movie.
But the script, just the whole him hitting on the taking phone numbers down and stuff for women was just what?
That seemed more of a throwback to the early 80s, 70s, when that was really a common thing in media. It was a little past its prime by 89.
Oh yeah, everything done in this movie was past its prime.
Yeah. Incidentally, Bob Clark was originally set to direct. He's best known for A Christmas Story and Porky's 1 and 2, and everything else on his filmography doesn't really need to be mentioned.
Yeah.
But he was fired before filming. He didn't back out. Incidentally, when Morita guest starred on The Tonight Show in 89 with Leno serving as guest host, they recalled that the movie had run out of money on the last day of filming, with key scenes yet to be shot and no budget left for editing and post.
Now, do you think it would have made much of a difference if they'd had... I think Clark is a more comedic director and may have had a better hand at doing this.
I think the car chases would have been more interesting because he would have gone for a more comedic direction with them, as opposed to trying to play them as generic car chases, hence the title this week.
But honestly, neither one of these directors are like,
No.
instant like
Mhm.
classic directors. I mean,
Right.
Porky's aside, this guy did a lot of movies that are not memorable.
This is a vehicle to cash in on Jay Leno's soon-to-be success because they saw him coming up and they knew he was a car buff, so they gave him something about cars.
Right.
And Pat Morita just, they could get Pat Morita because he was kind of on the downside after the whole Karate Kid thing.
I mean, I don't know if I agree though. Leno, I mean, was not a definite sell. Like,
True. So he wasn't a known actor, but I think they were trying to just cash in on him, being on the short list for the Tonight Show. I think it was probably in the wind that Carson was looking to retire by this point.
I think a lot of people thought that, assumed either Letterman, or it might have even been back when Joan Rivers was in a consideration, or Shandling even.
But Leno was always in the mix.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, a lot of people were upset that Letterman didn't get it, but Leno was always in the mix, and I think they were trying to cash in on that possibility. Now, there was a scene that really kind of caught me off guard. So there's a scene in a junkyard where they're trying to hide a body, the heavies, and they have to shoot the guy running the junkyard. But when they shoot him, it looks like something out of Star Wars. You actually see this red laser bolt come from the gun to the guy.
Gyro
jet,
gun?
Which is an actual thing. I researched it. There is such a thing as a gyro jet. Hasn't been produced since the 60s, I don't think.
And they used it because it would be easy to trace.
Mhm.
And then the homicide detective saying, "Oh, this is open and shut." I'm like, wait, what? Somebody used this crazy ass gun, and you think this is just a random happenstance?
Also, I watched some video of gyro jets being shot. They don't look like tracer rounds.
No.
I'm almost tempted to recommend the movie just for that scene and the ending, which we'll get to, because it literally looks like a Star Wars laser bolt.
It was kind of a, what did that just happen? There are a few moments in this movie where, yes, you just look like, what the fuck?
Another one of those what the fuck moments when Morita first gets to the US and he's in the taxi and he's just got this kind of dumb grin on his face while he's watching police bust some what look like gang members and seeing some prostitutes, on the corner. And he's just got this kind of dumb look on his face.
Yeah, I mean, was Tokyo really like a wholesome place? I mean, Detroit, granted, I mean, this is like 25, 30 years before I visited it for the first time. And kind of amazed off the bat, like, wow, that cops would pull you over for drag racing. I didn't think that happened. And this was done on location, which was kind of cool. Probably the coolest part of this movie, other than the ridiculous casting, was that, seeing Detroit back then and the ridiculous people mover that is the most useless mass transit system ever invented. Because it just takes you in this circle, very short distance.
Now, there was a clever gag with the warrant in one scene. They bust this one person and they claim they don't have a warrant, and he says, go ahead and arrest me if you don't have a warrant, because he knows he can get off easy. And then they produce the warrant. Not legal, but a clever gag.
One of Ernie Hudson's 3 scenes in the movie.
Yes.
How much better would this have been if it was Ernie Hudson instead of Leno in the starring role?
Remarkably better. Which is why I'm convinced it was a Leno vehicle.
Yeah. Like, I mean, think about that. If they had reversed the roles of this and Leno just had the bit part of the partner and Hudson, did the heavy lifting, they probably would have actually had a good movie on their hands here.
Although then it definitely would have been the Rush Hour beta version.
Yes.
Which is one of my titles. This because you'd mentioned Beverly Hills Cop. This really reminded me of Rush Hour.
This was definitely. I mean, they were taking Beverly Hills Cop here.
Yes.
I
And I
and
think Rush
actually
Hour took the same idea.
there was a Jackie Chan movie right before this too,
Okay.
where he's a New York cop and he goes to Hong Kong.
Oh, I think I've seen that one. Yeah, Super Cop, is it?
Or no, I think it's called The Protector or something. I
Okay,
looked at
I've seen that one.
we might
Mm.
want to consider doing it because it's just Jackie
Mm.
Chan and Danny Aiello as the partners,
Okay, yeah, and we should work some Jackie Chan in.
and it's
We haven't done a
serious.
yeah.
It's
Wow.
not joking.
Wow. Now, I have to say, and this is having, heard a lot of Japanese, I'm an anime geek. Marita's accent was a little iffy. He says when, he first gets brought in by Leno, read my rips.
Yeah,
Now, there is no L in Japanese. So a lot of times when a Japanese person who, who isn't fluent in English is speaking English, they do substitute the R for the L. But he uses an English R. There's no roll to it. And throughout the movie he does this. It's not a proper Japanese R. And there are just other points where it really just does get sketchy.
and why? I mean, you hope he got paid some good money for doing
Yeah.
this because it was it was embarrassing.
Uh-huh.
Like, I mean, it felt like he was putting on this caricature, almost a step and fetch it kind of thing for Japanese people. It felt like.
On the Tonight Show with Carson, Leno actually admitted that he detested the movie and is embarrassed that he agreed to be in it.
Oh, of course, but I mean, I'm sure he had what was a decent payday for him, and I mean, he was probably cheap
Mhm.
at the time they did this. So,
And this really has a lot of casual racism in it.
oh,
Particularly
definitely, yeah.
with Marita, also with a couple of African American characters.
And I think it was just more acceptable at the time.
Oh, it definitely feels like it's a product of the time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Actually, it seems like it's past.
Well, yeah, it's
It's
a little, like everything else in the movie, it's a little late. This would have been very fitting in the early 80s.
like you're right. The Japanese auto industry stuff was
That happened
mostly
in the late 70s, didn't it?
right. Right. It started in the 70s. Like the movie Gung Ho
Mhm. Yeah, it
was
was
like
like 83.
82.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that went down with the auto industry
Mhm.
had already happened by then.
And that's a big part of the subtext of the movie is anger over the Japanese auto industry kind of putting Detroit out of business in a lot of ways.
And I mean, seriously, in a if you believe in the whole parallel universe thing,
Mhm.
I would probably just be like a third generation factory auto worker myself.
Mhm.
That's what my grandparents did. It's what my father did for a long time. But then the bottom fell out.
Right.
'Cause they made a lot of cars in Jersey too. Like in North Jersey,
Yeah.
they had a lot of factories, which are now coincidentally owned by pharmaceutical companies where they make pills where they used to make the cars.
Well, one big industry to another.
Yeah.
Factory's a factory.
So I mean, that stuff was done by the mid '80s easily. Like like they had a lot of layoffs by then. So it wasn't exactly a big employer, but Detroit's still recovering from this.
Now that we're talking about this, I'm kind of getting the impression that maybe the script was written about 5 years before it was filmed.
But that's the thing. I looked at the writers of this, and they only have one of them. They're two writers. One of them, this is the only thing he ever has to his writing
Okay,
credit,
not surprising there.
and the other thing only has two other movies all around the same time in Hollywood.
Mhm.
So I
So
don't
they
get it.
sold this one, and this killed their careers.
I think they did stuff after. The one did stuff after this, but
Okay.
he only has a couple other credits.
Mhm.
He just did it. Probably none of his movies made money, so he probably became poisoned or
It's
just
like
gave
Bob
up.
Clark. He had those two good movies in the early 80s, and from there, it's a slow decline.
Yeah, like both of these guys, the directors, I mean, like movies from the hip and stuff, just
Yeah.
disposable 80s
Mhm.
movies.
Ooh, Navy SEALs.
Yes.
I've actually never seen the movie. I should watch it one of these days since I love that gag so much. Now, there is this car in the movie that's supposed to be this big experimental thing with this experimental turbocharger, which is the reason, that Morita's character is in the U.S. They're trying to track down the guy who stole it from the Japanese company, yada yada. The car looks a lot like a Trans Am.
I think they used a. They said they used a GTO.
Okay, they're similar bodies.
Yeah, but remember it was just the chart. It was just the one component of the engine that was the
Experimental,
prototype.
yeah. But they're presenting this car like it's this big step forward in design and all of this, and pretty typical for 89. It's a late 80s GTO or Trans Am. It's that, it's kit basically.
Yeah.
But a couple years later. Now, onto the scene where they decide to start some chaos at this opening where the big bad is.
And seriously, the only point to that was they didn't have enough movie.
Yeah. And
it was
it's
painfully obvious.
And it's at a free clinic. He's the city official who's kind of, dirty. And then they kill one of the heavies, and they figure, they go to his phone and they figure out who his last call was to, and it was to this guy. And so they decide to start throwing allegations at a city official at the opening of a free clinic.
Right.
What were they hoping to accomplish?
I don't know. None of it made any sense, except that they needed another 25 minutes of movie at least.
And of course, this leads to another big chase scene.
Yeah.
And one of the few scenes that surprised me, they get to this car rental place because they find out that the Charger was put into an old Toyota.
Which could be one of the funniest jokes in the movie, actually.
Yeah. This old woman had just rented a car as they're coming in. Of course, obviously, she rented the car with the thing. And I thought she was just going to drive off in it and they were going to be chasing her down. She actually gets into an accident in the parking lot. So that was a pleasant surprise.
Well, you're not expecting that much power out of the Toyota at
but
that
they
time.
didn't, turn that into the obvious chase scene. But of course, they went straight to the obvious chase scene after that.
They had time to kill, but they didn't have that much time to kill.
Yeah. Exactly. And they tried to do kind of a Blues Brothers thing with the multiple accidents, but of course you can't top the Blues Brothers.
That might have been more entertaining if they had this chase scene where they were both chasing the old lady.
Yeah, probably. That actually would have been much more entertaining because of her reactions to it. Yeah.
It would have been, yeah.
But of course, it's skilled drivers and closed course and really generic choreography. I guess you could call it choreography and chasing.
Yeah.
Leading to an accident which injures both Morita and Leno's character to the point where they're kind of collapsed on the street and trying to crawl away from the big bad. Until the big bad comes after them in a car and Pat Morita gets up and decides to run at the car.
I was kind of disappointed that he didn't do the crane.
Yeah.
But what he did instead, god damn, that was... I don't know what you can say.
A running jump kick. And I'm going to say, and I say this every week, please go to zombietakeout.com because this is the only clip I could find aside from the trailer. So it's the only thing that's going to be on there this week.
It's a drop kick.
It's a running jump kick into the windshield of the car. The windshield, bear in mind, probably the strongest material on the car because it has to sustain a lot. Through the windshield, through the driver's head. We get Troma splatter.
Yeah, I'm sorry if we spoiled this, but you know what? It's not spoiled because you have to see it for yourself.
Yeah.
And you're still going to say, what the fuck?
And I'm glad I was able to find that clip because if I couldn't, this would almost make it recommendation worthy.
Yeah, I was on the border too.
Just before we get into sequels and remakes, just a bit of bit more trivia. On Jimmy Kimmel Live, Kimmel played a clip from the film when he joked about a Southern California crime wave over the Tonight Show controversy. Leno's character was shot by a thug with Conan O'Brien's face mapped onto it. Then Morita's character defeated the thug. And also Steve Martin was on the Tonight Show with Leno playing Name That Clip. And they were, two clips from one from Shop Girl, one from Chief by the Dozen, two of Martin's movies, and of course he substituted a clip from this. So apparently it's been kind of a running gag.
Of course, and how they would have to get material out of this.
Yeah. All right, on to sequels and remakes.
On to sequels and remakes.
Please no. There's no real room for one. I mean, obviously they're not going to do one now. It's been 25 years since it was made. And,
what about a remake?
Isn't that what Rush Hour is for?
Yeah, you're right.
And it's much better.
Yeah, it is actually.
So,
There's somebody at IMDb that believes this is like 20 times. I think the words he used were 20 times better than Rush Hour.
And I'm not a Rush Hour fan, but I've seen the first one, and it is better.
I think.
That's not saying much.
I think they might be into it because of the shittiness.
Perhaps.
Which you got to admit, it is a draw. Just how bad a movie somebody has made.
See, to me, and on to Brains, I guess, this was very, very mediocre for the time. This was garden variety, cheesy action film from the late 80s. But the Dropkick did buy it a half a brain, so I'm going to go 2.5.
It's, as far as action movies go, there's two things to look at here. As an action movie goes, it's horrific because I mean, there's cops that don't use gloves, or they casually throw around that they're not using warrants. There's a survivalist with the marksmanship of a stormtrooper. And yeah, the car chase scenes are just so telegraphed. They're just wow. Okay. Then there's the comedy, and you really have to wonder how Leno still had a career after this.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't released until he got the Tonight Show.
Very, very true. Very true. Someone mercifully, well, maybe not. Maybe we would have been better off if they put this out and ruined his career. And yeah, just no timing whatsoever. No, and even if their timing was good, the joke itself was flat, and it was a car wreck. And you know what? I probably would have recommended this if this movie had just ended before an hour into it, because they had a pretty good movie up into the first hour, and then the last third of it was just obvious filler to make it all the way to the end. So I was at a 4, then I was down to a 3. But the kick gives it half a brain. 3.5 for me.
All right. And what have we learned?
Well, just call your MacGuffin a MacGuffin. No need for prototype.
Yeah. And I learned that we were very, very lucky that Leno got the Tonight Show because it kept him from doing too many more movies.
Oh, I think he should just stay to stand up.
Well, definitely, yeah. But I mean, at least this kept him from more movies.
True.
All right, so until next time, we will be reviewing Rare Exports: A Christmas Tale. This leads into our Christmas two-parter. This is the good part from everything I've heard. And I heard a bit more about the second part today that it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt real bad.
We're going to end 2015 with as much pain as humanly possible because that's what this year has been all about.
So far, and I've said this many times, Showgirls is the only movie I've vowed to never watch again. Judging from everything I've heard about Saving Christmas, I would happily marathon Showgirls, Crossroads, and Last Airbender before watching it a second time. Hell, if I could get out of watching it the first time, I would do that.
I think mine is Make Them Die Slowly. I don't think I'd do that.
Well, yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah.
All right, so until then, go to zombietakeout.com, check out the album art, the episode description, of course, the episode itself, which you're already listening to, and the clip of that last scene, because that's really the only part of the movie worth watching.
Yeah.
You also find the movie list, every movie we've reviewed so far, and every movie we're going to review. the request form. If you've got a movie you'd like to hear us review, please leave it on the request form. And of course, the recommendations list. This never had a chance.
No. Well, you know
Plain and
what?
simple.
I was thinking it was just that batshit crazy and awful that it almost might have gotten in just for that.
When all I knew was the concept,
But then
I
it got
thought
boring.
maybe. Then I watched about 5 seconds of it and said no.
It just got boring in the end, though.
Mm.
There's no need to sit through the whole hour and a half of this.
Yeah. You also find links to subscribe via RSS and iTunes. Please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And if you enjoy the show, spread the word. Give us a little word of mouth. Of course, we appreciate all of the listeners we have so far, but more would be better. You can email us, zombietakeout@gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail at 414-368-ZTO1, or for the Alphanumerical Challenge.
You can go through the windshield.
414-368-9861. I don't have anything better.
Yeah.
Of course, always remember that you will always be calling from the middle of Milwaukee, and until next time, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life, there you are.
I'm bending over backwards here, to be fair.
So you're gonna have to wait a while for Frankenhooker. Sorry, guys.
Probably early February.
Yeah. And that brings us to this week's movie. Whatever could it be? Are you still there?
Sorry about that. I had to clear. We'll just take that again. I had to mute to clear my throat. I'll just take it like I normally do.
Do you have, like, for an outtake, do you have the...
I have you, and I think that's it.
you have me going,
Yeah.
and for this week's movie?
Yeah. This is our outtake, obviously.
Yeah.
I'll just take it from normal.